I'm getting ready to install my camshaft. You'll notice I cleaned up these bores here. There's actually little O-rings that go sit in there. Yes, there's an oil passage there, so those should be there. One on the other end as well. We'll put our bearing in again. Now another thing to note, most of the pressure on the camshaft pushes down with the rocker arm assemblies on this. You can actually take and flip the cam bearings over if they get damaged. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to lube our bearings. We want oil in there. Make sure we don't dry start anything here. Make sure everything's clean. I've already blown all the holes. Don't dump oil down the holes because that will cause issues too. Hydro locking the bolt. Now we're going to grab our camshaft. Kind of heavy, finger pinching suckers. Carefully put it in here. Sure, it slides back and forth. We'll take and start starting all of our caps. Notice there's only one bolt in them. Shaft right here is what holds the rocker shaft in. So this is 3, this is 4, 5, 6. Okay. Get them started there. Mark on that one for 2. Yeah, totally. There's a couple of different types of seals that go up in here. This they call the racetrack seal. It would go right here normally if it were that style block. This is not, so that's just an extra piece that we're not going to use. You need to add some gasket eliminator to the caps, because if you don't, this sits up here, this will actually leak out the front cover and cause an oil leak, so we don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a bead of gasket eliminator right here. The book told us to put a dab eliminator in. So we're going to go just like this, making sure we don't get too close to stuff. Like I said, it will squish out. Doesn't take very much. Not like that. I'm going to go over here, because that does seal up. And this one is my rear one. I gotta put some oil in there first. We're going to do the same thing on this one. And there as well. Like I say, if you don't do that, it will leak. So kind of an important thing to do. Get our oil here, and that's what I forgot to do. So don't need a whole lot because you don't want to get it wet. We need to make sure that we get the dowel lined up on the camshaft gear. This takes a special socket. This is actually the wrong one for this engine. The one for these studs anyways is about that much longer. That's how we turn these bolts in. I'm going to go ahead and chop all these caps down and make sure that they're down tight. Same thing here, they typically say to torque it on the tang side, so we're doing the torque this one first. Cam's kind of an exception because we have to torque all of these before we can actually do the front cap. Because we have to put that gear in and then install the front cap, pull the plate in there. It's kind of a trick to do. So okay, we're going to come back to that front cap, but we're going to go ahead and torque these down. Order doesn't really matter. This one, you have to finagle it because the bolt's too long. This is not by any means the right way, but it's what I got, so that's what I'm using. Here we have our camshaft drive gear. This is called a diamond seal, and right here is a perimeter seal, they call it. This thing was notorious on some of the older 60s. They had some update kits to fix it. That needs to be replaced every time. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of those. And take our new perimeter seal, and I'm going to walk it on. I'm not going to roll it because it's a flat O-ring. It's got to be in there the correct way. We'll take and siliglide that before we install it. Same thing with this one. We want to make sure our groove's nice and clean. Just got some old Siliglide in it because it's the same thing that goes down in there. That's ready to be installed. Like I said, I'll Siliglide around this surface and this surface. That goes in right here. Got to fit in there and seal up against here. You got to watch that there's no gasket eliminator here. Okay, we got to put our cam gear in here. Notice here's the dowel, and I'm going to slide the camshaft back as far as I can. I got a mark here. There's 2 marks down here and 2 marks down here that are all lined up. So basically what I need to do is I need this mark right here. I'm going to go ahead and put a mark next to it so you can see it. There's a bolt hole here and there's a bolt hole on the cap, so we have to make sure we get those lined up too. They're kind of a bugger. But essentially, I got my gears lined up. Now I need to line up my holes, which can be a real trick sometimes. You have to actually turn the engine to get the bolts in. It's a real pain in the butt. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide my camshaft forward, make sure the pin is lined up. Another thing to be really careful of on this camshaft is this dowel pin right here. If you don't get the gear lined up, it will actually push this back in and get your timing off, and essentially what will happen the first time you start the engine or turn the engine over by hand to set the valves, you're going to bend the valve. Okay, this gear here, I'm going to put this bolt in. This is a one-use bolt. You shouldn't ever reuse it, but we're going to. Make sure I get it under the head of the bolt on the threads. Really good on this one because it torques to 100 and something if I remember right, and then like 180 degrees. Why I'm putting that in there is to hold that cam gear so it doesn't come out of time. If I didn't do that, back here, kind of see the dowel pin in there. We don't want that to come out of time. Snug this camshaft gear up. I can't torque it until I get the front cover on. There's a fixture that bolts basically in the housing here and comes in here and holds this gear so you're not torquing against the gear train. So like I said, we're just going to snug it because I don't want to get my dowel pin out of alignment. And then I've got to come back here and I have to turn the engine. And I got really close. That's amazing. So it's going to take a bolt like this. Usually I like them to be with the captured head and a magnetic socket, because if you drop that in there, you're in trouble. It's no fun to fish out of there. So I'm going to get it started. I think we're right, and then I'll try to put my cap on, and then we'll suck that seal and diamond seal back in. There's our cap that we had put the gasket eliminator and stuff on. So this is kind of one of those critical things. I've got to torque this cap down before I can get the other bolts started. If I don't, it won't line up correctly. So I'm going to have to torque those down. I may have to turn that just a hair. If you have a really deep, that doesn't have a ridge in there, you can use the socket. I believe it's 12 millimeter. Make sure my bolt hole is lined up. These 2 bolts here are pretty critical that they get torqued. So if that comes out, that could cause a mess. I've already torqued the cap on top, so we're done with the camshaft. I'm going to grab a hold of the camshaft and make sure I got in play, which I do. The next thing I need to do is set my backlash on my gear. You can see this gear slides in and out like that. A special tool that goes in here and bolts the cover on. The cover's on, and then through the top here there's some holes, and there's an adapter that screws in here for dialing. What you have to do is get your measurement right. Got a correct amount of backlash, because if you didn't have this adjustment and they shaved the head or the block, the gear lash would be off. So we need to set that. We'll get set up for. Okay, now we've got to set our backlash on our gears. As you can see, we've got a lot there. Now, you got to remember, I'm moving this gear and this gear, so it's a combination of the 2. So what I need to do is I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this up here. I got 0 backlash there, so I'm going to scooch it back just a hair. I'm allowed 2 to 8 thousandths. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down there. And I'll show you the actual way they want you to. This is what we got before we get too crazy away. So I'm going to hold this gear. I have about 4 thousandths, which is right within our spec. I'm going to call it good. If you don't have the front cover off, you can still do this. It's kind of a real pain in the butt if you got to pull the camshaft, but it's something that has to be done here. Essentially what you do, this tool right here is going to bolt into the housing here, and this gear moves side to side, right? So it really goes in like this. And that would bolt to the front cover. What that allows you to do is to adjust that one way or the other, and you do a dial indicator just like I am, but you're going to move the gears from the top. What you do is you take this reading with both gears moving, and you're allowed up to 12 thousandths for used parts. But if you're taking the reading here, you're measuring this gear and this gear moving, so you have to keep that in mind. That's how you set the idler gear backlash. There's 2 plugs up here. You can stick a screwdriver in here and move the gears back and forth. That's how you normally do it. If you got the cover on, like I said, I'm not doing that. The other thing, there's a mark there, a mark there. Notice how those are lined up. There's 2 marks in there. You gotta look real close, but you can see them. There's a 0 and like a darkened line. And then there's 2 gears that are marked here. Those have to be lined up. If not, like I said, you'll bend valves and all kinds of funny stuff, along with the pin up here on the camshaft back here behind this plate. But I'll have to come back and torque this. I can't. There's a plug here and a plug here, and that's how you move the gears so you can measure the backlash. We would screw our dial indicator into here, and that would bring it out to here. So that's how we can do that. I can use this to turn the engine over. This plate needs to go in there to hold this camshaft here so you can torque it. Okay, I had to move it down here. It wouldn't clear right. The book says to torque it to 55 foot-pounds, and then we're going to turn it 120 degrees. This one's a really hard one to turn. So I need to go 2 hexes, which is there, and it needs to end up right there. Okay. I'm going to use my breaker bar up here and put a mark on my hex so I can see where I'm going to. Almost there. Okay. We want to make sure we don't forget to take our done. Now we can go ahead and put our cover here. Okay, we're going to put our camshaft cover on. I put a thin bead of gasket eliminator on it.